And we will just, oh, yes, continue. Sweet. Let's start. I can never tell. Okay. Hi, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you. Today, we're going to be hearing about designing human-centered AI experiences at LinkedIn. I don't know about you, I am super stoked. We have Carolyn and Christine here who are going to share their knowledge. It's a case study about like, what does that actually look like for LinkedIn? I'm sure as all you know, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time there. I want to know how the AI works. Like, that's exciting. But before we get started, I wanted to kind of introduce who we are. First and foremost, I am the only one speaking right now, but there are a ton of people behind the scenes, like Jordan, who helped make the survey, take our survey, and so many others who helped make this meetup possible. So thank you to so many other people who are behind the scenes, and all of our other volunteers who I may not have recognized, like that little person emoji off to the right, that's you. Just thank you, everyone who's made this possible, and all the people over the years. We've been going for 4 years. So how many of you, this might be your first MLUX? Maybe type it in the chat. I would love to hear about that. If this is your first rodeo, welcome. We're so excited that you're here. Hi. What we like to think of for MLUX is how do we use data science techniques, AI, machine learning in order to inform and drive UX design decisions? But also, how do we think about designing better data-intensive experiences and letting our users know like what's actually happening with their data, how they can control it, how they can give the system feedback. I'm also going to say too, if you aren't familiar, UX is short for user experience, but it's much more than pixels on a page. It is things like interaction design, user research, information architecture. We're actually going to hear from Carolyn, a UX researcher, and Christine, a UX designer, about what they do. And also, I'm sorry for all the data scientists in the room. I saw some data engineers and everything too. Data, that's it. This is what you do. No, just kidding. I'm using that word, but it's capturing data analysis, stats, artificial intelligence, and so much more. So when these two disciplines come together, they make really cool experiences like this. I really like this example. It's from Pinterest. I updated the people's page. I haven't updated this example. This is on my to-do list. But this is still one of my favorites because like as you're scrolling through, like you can click the lower right-hand corner of this Pinterest app and it resets the search like right there. And like, you don't need to know whether it's computer vision or if it's NLP, like, oh, do they have a bunch of similar looking images? Are they scraping the website to say like pizza? The point is you're not making the user go back up to the search box and the typical design and be like, I'm looking for pizza or whatever that kind of looks like and have to articulate their want or need or task, whatever they're doing. You're letting them just kind of be powered by AI to complete their task in that really cool type of experience. So if you're interested in this and want to hear more, great news. I have written up a Medium article, so take a look there. And there are a bunch of other examples. So that's kind of what we mean about MLUX as a field, but our goal here as a meetup is really to create a collaborative environment for UX, data science, PM, SWE, everyone in between, in order to like come together, share these best practices, share thoughts, discussions around different types of approaches. And we do that by hosting case studies like today or tech talks, as well as other types of panels and all this stuff too. And good news. We are on like every social media platform. You name it, we're probably there. We're not on TikTok. I'm sorry. It's just because like can't handle another thing. Maybe we'll be on YouTube Shorts that just launched. But good news, we're also on LinkedIn. Ooh, so feel free to follow us wherever you get your social media, I suppose. But the more important thing is I want to stress that we as a community, MLUX can't happen without you. And so I want to say, first off, just thank you to all the volunteers who helped make this possible. But also thank you to people like Carolyn and Christine who are volunteering to give talks, Jim Williams, who's going to give a talk with Anmal next month. Those are volunteers who just kind of messaged us and were like, hey, I'm interested, I have something to share. So if you have a cool thing and you want to share it with our community, reach out, humans@mluxsf.com. I did not have the foresight that we were going to be outside of San Francisco. I'm sorry, the SF is still very important. Also, if you just want to volunteer, no MLUX experience needed, awesome. Like Jordan, who threw together our survey with Karini, amazing. And if you ever see some cool tweets that you're like, maybe MLUX community would like this, I am more than tweet at MLUX in the comments or something, or retweet it and tag us. I'm happy to retweet it. Always send things our way. but mostly we are interested in your feedback. Woohoo! Look at this great GIF. Oh my gosh, how fun is this, right? This is the survey that hopefully you all are filling out as I'm talking, and that, as I mentioned, does not hurt my feelings because I'm very excited that you're filling it out. This is like our first time actually taking a strategic approach towards like, oh, let's actually collect feedback, because normally we just do it like in a one-off meetup or that type of thing too. So please, like, this survey is incredibly important for us, not only as community organizers, but also planning for 2022. So if you could take a moment and just kind of share your thoughts, what has stood out to you, what you really like, what you might want to change, this is your chance to give us that feedback. And as I mentioned, good news, page 2, so we've separated it out. Page 1, give very serious feedback. We take that seriously and we will not share that. Also, you can totally give it anonymously. That's cool too. Page 2, though, is for a fun clustering live demo. So it says it at the top, live clustering activity. We're going to do that on September 28th. And so please take a moment to fill out that information. It has fun questions like, is a burrito a sandwich? Do you prefer cats or dogs? We want to hear all about it. So that is what we're going to be using for a live demo about clustering. Fantastic. And I wanted to give a big shout out to Feminist AI again. Thank you so much. If you are not aware, we are part of the larger Feminist AI community, and they have a ton of really amazing programming going on right now, including Return by Gababaya, which is being hosted right now in our studio space down in LA. So if this is of interest, you should definitely follow them on Instagram. Krizia is actually the social media manager for them, and she makes these amazing kind of graphics and stuff too. So thank you, Krizia. And also thank you to all the folks who donated money for tickets, because that goes back to community programming like this. And so other programs include, we did an Algorithms of Oppression's book club with Dr. Sophia Noble, the Women's Center for Creative Work in the Black Women's Free Library. We've done other types of like hands-on coding or featuring other artists. And that's because of communities like this who are donating. So just thank you. If you're like, where does the money go? We're like, we pay for artists. So like, hey, and like helping others learn. So hopefully too, my goal is to have some of those folks come back and speak in 2022 about the cool things that they're making. So keep that on your radar. All right, that is enough about this. I want to actually get you all hyped about this case study. Okay, so fun story. Carolyn and I actually met like 2 years ago, 3 years. It must have been 3 years ago, right?
3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we were talking for quite some time. We're like, oh my God, this would be such a good case study. You should totally do this as a case study. And then like things happened, COVID happened, all this stuff too. And so we kind of like dropped off, which is fine. But then we were put back into this UX strat think tank together. And so we all did like a group talk. And I was all like, this was such a good talk. You should totally give it again. Do you want to give it again in like a couple weeks? And they're like, sure, this is great. But then in the last couple weeks, Christine and Carolyn have been sharing it on LinkedIn too. And they're like, we went to our first MLUX meetup together like a couple years ago. And I literally was all like, it's full circle. You come from like coming to an in-person event to actually giving the talk yourself. So, and I'm really excited for you all. If you haven't seen this talk already, I think that it's a really great example and case study about like how to think about design for this. But I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to hand it over to you all. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. We are thrilled to be here. Yeah, Christine, I remember the time we went to that talk. It was so fun. It was all in the before times.
I know, in person, crowded like with tiny like plastic chairs together. Now it's just so different, but yeah.
Okay, do one of you want to share your screen? I think you're both co-hosts, so I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I will share my screen, but Carolyn will kick us off. So let me make sure I do this right.
And also thank you both so much for sharing your evening with us. We are so excited that you're here. And for folks on the line too, feel free to mute yourself and turn off your video as well.
Yeah, no problem. I had, I don't know if anyone probably didn't notice, two small humans that might run in. Hopefully not. My husband is trying to wrangle them, but
love it. Live studio audience. That's what I say.
Yeah, live studio audience. Yeah. So it's 5 o'clock here. So it's dinner time. They're running around probably hangry. Cool. So thank you all again. Super thrilled that we're here. Super thrilled that you guys all joined to hear us speak. I'm so honored to be speaking here with Michelle. We will be talking about designing human-centered AI experiences at LinkedIn. So you might be here because you're trying to understand AI more and how it operates at different organizations. Maybe you're looking for ways to connect with AI engineers or other like-minded kind of individuals, or you're just looking for some tips on how to design more human-centered AI experiences for users. So we're going to try to cover all those things and more, and just our journey at LinkedIn. So I'm Carolyn. I think I was introduced probably several times. I'm a principal user researcher at LinkedIn. I've been there for like 6 years, so feel like kind of like a dinosaur now. I'll pass it off to Christine at some point, but just wanted to say she's my amazing design partner, work bestie. I am so lucky and fortunate to work with her. So very excited to partner on this. So I wanted to kick it off with just some funny stuff. How did we get started on this journey? It actually started with a ton of stories of bad relevance, bad experiences with LinkedIn's AI. You probably run into this either on our site or just seen it in passing. It's almost become part of our brand, sadly. So Sarah Cooper here, comedian, I love her, tweeted, LinkedIn just asked me if I wanted to congratulate my friend Erin on her new position at Unemployed. So that's a classic example of a bad LinkedIn relevance, where we notified someone without really thinking about what we were notifying them for. And then another example is someone tweeting out, and if you look on Twitter, these are everywhere, sadly. Someone said, at least LinkedIn also can't figure out what kind of jobs I should apply for. And as you can see, the recommendations they have are all over the place. They have wine sales, gardener, independent stylist, presumably very, very, very different kinds of roles that require different skills. So not a great experience. And then the next one that I wanted to share, which is hilariously a TikTok video. So Michelle, you got to get on TikTok. So I'll let Christine play it for you.
Hey, hi, I found some jobs for you. You did? They're really good. Okay. Have you ever thought of being the Senior Vice President of Consumer Relations at Google? What? No. You haven't? Dude, to be perfect for that job. I haven't even graduated. I literally work at a convenience store. Do you actually think I should apply for this? Yeah, you'd be perfect for it. Okay. Okay, I applied. Are you laughing at me? Good job. No, you got this. Yeah, you got this.
That one always makes me laugh. So like, these are all super hilarious, right? But actually, like, nailing AI, nailing relevance, it's really critical. So it may seem funny in these moments, but when you miss the mark, you really can offend people. You can really undermine trust in products, and we constantly reinforce, like, LinkedIn is just not the place for me when they hit these kinds of experiences. So we've broken this talk into 3 chapters. So first, I'll start talking off about how we researched our own AI. So we are trying to understand when and why these kinds of experiences are happening for people. Then I'll hand it off to Christine, and she'll talk about designing for AI and how can we as designers help create better AI experiences. And then finally, we'll end with shifting the AI culture at LinkedIn. So we often see people working on AI in silos, and we've definitely wanted to change that so that we're all creating solutions together. So talk a little bit about that as well. So I wanted to start talking off about LinkedIn's vision and why we do what we do. So our vision as a company is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. So whether it's connecting people to jobs, helping people build their businesses, growing someone's career through learning opportunities, important connections, information like machine learning UX, LinkedIn is really about life-changing opportunity. And LinkedIn AI powers all of that, right? AI is like oxygen at LinkedIn. Without good AI, you have no good user experience. And I think that's true for so many other companies out there. As you can see from the image, all the data that we collect on a user powers so many aspects of our site, from our news feed to recommended events, pages, ads, job recommendations, you name it, it all runs on AI. So I wanted to talk about the first chapter of our journey. So that was kind of researching our own AI. And we called this project Relevance Experience. So here is a picture of Christine and I, again, in the before times. We wanted to create this UX point of view on LinkedIn relevance, LinkedIn AI. I keep using both terms. We kind of use them synonymously at our organization. And I know that's not true necessarily for others, but that's how we call it at LinkedIn. There were no clear goals. We were just seeing all this user feedback around AI. And we wanted to create this point of view. We had a wonderful supportive management team within design and research, but it wasn't an official company goal. Was it like an official OKR or however you measure your goals? No other functions were supporting this. So it was a side project for a while. And we began just like any research project, just like any user research project, if you're familiar how that runs. Like we knew already a lot about how our users were perceiving relevance, but we didn't know much about how it was even created and who was a part of that. So we did a ton of internal interviews with our engineers, with data scientists, taxonomists, product managers, researchers, designers at LinkedIn and outside of the company as well. Here's a photo of just a few of the designers that we talked to. We read books and articles, we took courses, we went to Michelle's meetup. All of this stuff really helped us understand what was happening within our organization, as well as how other companies were tackling challenges in machine learning and AI. So I want to underscore that this was actually a lot of work, and it's kind of like there's no impact happening at this point. It's just like us trying to really understand the whole ecosystem and getting people excited about the problem and what we were learning. And we were so fortunate to meet and partner with some really smart AI people. So to give some context in this photo, Christina is talking to the head of LinkedIn AI at the time, Deepak Agarwal, who was on the very left. We learned so much from him and members of his team. And now I'll just go ahead and hand it off to Christine to talk a little bit more about what did we learn.
Awesome. Thanks, Carolyn. So we learned a lot, and we could go on forever just about the findings and the learnings, but I think our biggest takeaway was said by our head of AI, which is trash in equals trash out. And I think that really resonated with us. And so we found that AI isn't really that magical. It turns out it's very much like a human body. If you put bad stuff into it, bad stuff will happen. So what does trash mean in this context? Well, turns out there are many reasons why a result might feel irrelevant. That could be a lack of data or a lack of clarity as to what that data means. And combined with incorrect weighting, that leads to a lack of accuracy, which is what we call a bad relevance experience. And so in understanding how this bad AI was being, or I guess relevance was being created, we then started to think about how design could solve for these things. Could we design guidance and better ways of inputting data? Or could we leverage user research to help us understand how to interpret this data so that we're creating better outputs? So we had our equation for this bad relevance. Now we can go back to our product and start to diagnose what was causing bad relevance experiences. So on LinkedIn, your profile is what we use to understand who you are and what your aspirations are. And in Roxy's case, she's told us that she's a manager. That's a piece of data, but we lack clarity behind what that data actually means. For example, is she a product manager? Is she a store manager? Is she a people manager? And so this subsequently can result in bad job recommendations. We see in her results, global product manager, design program manager, These are all very different roles. Roxy is also open to work. And this feature, if you guys aren't familiar with it, it allows you to express what you want in your next role. So she's got her desired titles listed: senior marketing manager, lead marketing manager. But we actually discovered that we weren't really weighting people's desired future titles as much as their current titles. And sometimes there's also just a lack of data, meaning we don't have the data at all. An example of this is users not having updated profiles, such as their latest role or title. Maybe they have outdated skills, and that's not really their fault. Many users don't realize how we use skills in the product. And so even though Roxy is interested in marketing roles, it looks like she actually hasn't added marketing skills to her profile. So combine this with an unspecific title, and it's really hard for us to know with confidence what types of roles that she's both qualified and interested in. So we did our internal research, we looked and audited our product, and now it was finally time to think about how could we solve for this. And so here at LinkedIn, don't know about you guys, but we're a huge fan of frameworks. We're a huge fan of acronyms. So we came up with STRAW. And STRAW is still a work in progress, but we're iterating on it, we're working on it, we're kind of implementing it now. But this is what it stands for, and I'll explain what each of these mean in a sec. So the first is standardize. Does the design leverage our known data? And what is standardization? Well, at LinkedIn, we use standardization to kind of help us map data to other data. So for example, if you're called a product designer, we know internally that that is sometimes called UX designer at another company. And so encouraging users to use the standardized data as opposed to like a custom title or maybe a title that's less commonly known in the industry as much as possible, that helps us solve for that lack of clarity. And sometimes we don't have certain titles standardized either, and that's okay, in which case we can still help users help us. So in this example, let's say maybe we don't have content experience designer as a standardized title, we can still ask this user to help us map it back to the closest thing so that we understand internally what this title actually means. Second is, are we being transparent? So helping users understand how we're using their data is important to establishing that trust. And to have a LinkedIn profile already is asking for a lot of data. So whenever we ask for data, we want to explain exactly why it's important and how the data is being used. The third is realistic. So realism refers to how we set users' expectations. An example is our jobs page, which the TikToker kind of made fun of. And this is where we recommend jobs to users. So this used to be called jobs you may be interested in, but depending on how much we understood about that user and how many relevant jobs actually existed, these recommendations could just be completely off. And so we found that being unrealistic created a perception of, well, geez, like LinkedIn's just completely irrelevant, doesn't know anything about me, and creates great content for TikTokers like the one that Carolyn showed. And so this is why content design is super important, tone and voice in a page. So this is the new kind of updated design, and the team updated this page to be more transparent by explaining how these recommendations are being made. And rather than promise that the user would be interested in them, we're framing this as like, hey, these are recommendations coming from your profile and your search history. So this helps the user kind of diagnose why jobs may be less relevant. Like maybe they performed a job search for something completely different from their profile. And so this is what we call relevance humility. By not promising that our recommendations are going to be the best or always going to be relevant, this helps users be more forgiving of when we do miss the mark. And another barrier to lack of data stems from users not understanding which data to give. A lot of feedback that we hear is that users don't know how to best fill out their profiles, and members have so many options and different ways to fill out the profile, different fields. They don't know if they're all important or not, but we at LinkedIn understand what types of data are being leveraged in what ways, which led us to the approachable principle. Are there ways to help guide the user to input the types of data that's going to serve them the best? And finally, we should also have a good reason for collecting the data that we do and make sure that's being used effectively. So a few years ago, we had a way for users to actually provide feedback on their entire jobs page, which is this sort of thumbs up, thumbs down module. with the implication that this would improve their future recommendations. And you can consider this module transparent, it's approachable, like it's easy to click, low friction, maybe it's even realistic. It helps set the tone for our users, and that we knew that these jobs might not be perfect. So we wanted to give them an easy way to rate these jobs. But the issue with this design was that it wasn't worthwhile, and I'll tell you why. It's because we couldn't leverage the data from this module in a way that gave back to the users. We didn't understand which specific jobs users didn't like. So this is really just applying that rating to the entire page. But maybe as a user, you liked only one of them, or maybe you didn't like 3 of them. And so we didn't actually have enough specific data to recalculate this page immediately. So if we think back to what Michelle showed with the Pinterest kind of example, like users were clicking on this like thumbs down, thinking that it would actually recalibrate the entire page immediately. We weren't actually able to do that. And so while this module was well intended, it sort of eroded a little bit of that trust with our users. And so now the latest jobs module allows users to hide recommendations that aren't relevant at a job level and not an entire page, which gives us more leverageable data. And so users also get immediate feedback, the job is hidden, and a user would also expect that this role shouldn't show up anywhere else in the product. So for example, like a job ad in the feed. So as a designer, it was important to work with product and engineering to understand how this data should trickle across different product verticals, which means collaborating and talking with other teams, which Carolyn will get into in a sec.
Yeah, so Christine talked a lot about so many ways design can be part of the process and creating a better AI experience. But as she mentioned, as we were doing this work, we realized there was a huge lack of connection between functions and understanding of different disciplines. There's this pervasive culture of AI at LinkedIn being this engineering problem. Like, I did this research, now go and fix it. But really good relevance is everyone's responsibility. So we wanted to change that. So this is the final chapter to our story. It was about shifting the AI culture. And one of the ways we're doing that is through workshops. We call these AI empathy workshops. The name AI empathy might make you think this workshop is about having empathy for a robot. Like, I think this picture is from Ex Machina, or like having empathy for the Terminator or Alexa or Siri. It's not. It's more about having empathy for our users who experience moments like these. Like, I don't know if you guys remember from The Office where Michael Scott listens to the GPS and drives into the lake. And the people who actually build like the GPS or build the Siris and build the Alexas, right? So far we've done 3 of these workshops with over 150 participants across AI, product design research, data science, engineering, and more. We've done this in the before times, before COVID, in person, and also during COVID, completely online. In fact, our last workshop was about 3 or 4 months ago. And the goals of this workshop are as follows. So one is to how might we help AI engineers better understand their users? They don't often get to spend time in research sessions. And so this workshop is great for them because it's catered all around AI and the experience users have around AI. How do we help non-engineers like a designer or a researcher better understand how AI works? So basically everything that we learned in the process of researching it. And then just empowering these cross-functional teams to make better AI decisions together. And build deeper relationships between these teams. So getting them all together was so important for us. And then the final thing, because I feel like everything at work, I have this mantra, is like, is this fun? Because if this is not fun, then what's the point? Like, why are we doing this? So we wanted to make this a fun experience for everyone. So how do we make this fun? Christine and I, so for each of these workshops, we actually conducted a user research study before the workshop. It was an unmoderated user Zoom study where we asked people, LinkedIn members, to provide their LinkedIn profile, like the example here, and answer questions about their experience, in particular, their experience with our relevance. So again, here is an example of one of these participants. We've hidden parts of their identity, but their title at the time was head of STAR at a pharmaceutical company. So, and as we know from what Christine just said, this is not really a title that's standardized. This is not a title we understand. So then we asked attendees of the workshop to guess, what would this user's ideal job recommendations be based on the information we have from them? So they could use what they could. They could look at all the profile information, LinkedIn activity, like how many times have they visited, sent messages. We provided everything possible about this particular user. And we wanted them to find as many jobs that could be relevant for this user. So basically mimicking what our AI was doing. So this particular workshop, as I mentioned, looked at job recommendations, but this could work for any kind of LinkedIn feature. So here's an example of what one of the teams guessed. So one of the guesses for this user that I was talking about, head of STAR, they thought maybe head of pharmacovigilance at Hayes, or maybe chief of staff to the president and CEO at AHIP. Those seem like very, very different roles. If you actually look at the roles, they're pretty high up positions. One seemed more like an executive assistant role, and the other one was way more scientific. So very different from each other. I mean, could be relevant, but unlikely. We also asked teams as they were doing this exercise to reflect on how confident they were in these recommendations, like what data or context they felt were missing. We even showed them a short clip of the user talking about their career goals, why they were on LinkedIn, what they were hoping to get out of LinkedIn. And then after watching the video, reflect on, would they change their recommendations based on this video? And then finally, we actually showed them what the user thought about the real job recommendations. So here's a screenshot of that same user walking through their recommended jobs. And you see the caption, "This is not the same type of product development that I've worked in." So what they meant by that is that they were looking for a product development job that had a commercial business focus, not a scientific focus. It's very nuanced in the pharmaceutical industry. And if you recall, those guesses those teams had, they weren't anything close to what the user was looking for. So there were a lot of learnings. Like first, our AI algorithms were better than our teams at guessing, which was good. At least they got product development, but they weren't the right type of product development. So yeah, we had a lot of learnings. I'll name two of them. One is the specificity of job titles, skills, and industry is so important. Like Christine was saying, context is everything. And then that good relevance is very difficult. We have a lot of information from this user, but not necessarily the right information, like, hearkening back to what Christine was saying. And then another larger theme, there were so many things that came out of this workshop that we hit on. And one of our product managers who was attending stated, it's like the profile really has two jobs. One, it's to represent the member accurately in their work history, right? But two, it's to actually feed our relevance. And how do you do both things well? Because they're related, but they're different, right? And a lot of this comes back to designing for this, right? And a lot of the things that Christine walked through. So that's a nice segue into what was the impact of all of these workshops that we had. It was very well received because these poor engineers, most of them were data scientist engineers, didn't really get to see their users on a daily basis. So to have a workshop that was really catered for them was super exciting. So the average rating was quite high. And we really achieved like one of our primary goals of just shifting the perception of what users want from our site. So here's some quotes. An engineer said, we aren't the user, and thinking from points of view of diverse users is important to improve the relevance. And UX people know that's super important. From a product manager, we heard, I have a lot more empathy for our members. I feel more inspired and motivated to help solve these problems. Again, hitting on the empathy piece of it. And then we also got great feedback from people who were, didn't really understand relevance, right? So designer said, relevance is hard. We need to work with our engineers earlier in the design process. So there was not only empathy for our users, but also empathy for the people who actually build our algorithms. And finally, I wanted to end our talk on sort of our overall goals, like what we started with this crazy project. So, at the center of it, it's about people, like a lot of UX stuff, right? So creating the best human-centered AI experiences that help us achieve LinkedIn's vision of economic opportunity. So it's helping our LinkedIn users, our members and customers experience life-changing opportunity through AI. And it's also helping our LinkedIn employees, designers, engineers, et cetera, understand AI and how to apply and how to design for it. So with that, thank you all very much. And I'll hand it back to you, Michelle.
Yay, thank you. I know all of us are on mute with our cameras off, but I'm sure everyone's giving you a big round of applause right now. I also want to say to love what you're saying about relevance and context. So what I'm hearing is everyone should go and follow MLUX on LinkedIn, so that way they get more MLUX relevant jobs, right?
Exactly. You got it, Michelle.
Nailed it. Not on TikTok though, we're not there. Or Instagram, sorry, because anyways, thank you for that talk. I really loved it. Even though, like I had mentioned, I've already seen it before, but I think that it's just like such an amazing win too, to kind of be like, look, it doesn't need to be hard in order to think in your user's shoes. And I think like tying together with that workshop about like, hey, it's very easy to kind of just like, let's just hear from our users. What are they thinking? Why might this fail? And like put other people in that perspective, I think is a really great way to kind of tie it to more of a hands-on experience. So kudos to you to like making a program. Okay, so now we're in the Q&A portion. I want to remind folks too, how we're going to do this is we're going to type our questions in the chat and I will go through and answer some of them. Thank you. I think some people were writing some questions throughout the talk, which is great. But I have a question for both of you. We got a little bit of insight into like your process overall for this project, but like what does it look like on a day-to-day for you, like working with AI engineers? Like what does that hands-on look like? Are you working with AI engineers, PMs? Tell us.
Yeah, I'll go first because my answer is probably shorter than Christine, because I think she's more on a daily basis. For me, it's I'm a researcher, so it's project by project. Like if a project is a little bit more focused on AI and relevance, then absolutely, like they're part of the research project in which described here, we will talk to users and make sure engineers are part of the process and really internalizing those insights. Nearly every project touches on AI. So nearly every project I try to involve an AI engineer. But for me, it's really through like different studies and is how we kind of incorporate them.
Super cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can give my perspective, and just for folks' context, I actually, like when we first did this project, I was an individual contributor and like very heads down in design and very involved with the engineering teams, like data science, et cetera. So as an individual contributor, a lot of the work was around collaborating with engineers and like doing testing, bug bashing, kind of looking at how these experiences looked like with kind of the working data, and also asking them about like, hey, like, is this even feasible? Sharing designs with them, things like that. And a lot of it was also just, we're a little further from DS, to be honest, like in my org. So a lot of it was like getting to know those data partners, understanding what types of data we could leverage and what things could inform our designs. So that was like at an IC level. I actually now manage the team. And I think as a manager, it's important too to like create those spaces. So for example, like if you want your designers to work with data, to work with AI, they need to know who those partners are. And those partners also need to have that bandwidth carved for them to actually work with those designers. Like it can't always be, a favor that they're, working with these designers. It has to be like, hey, this is an OKR that's shared across teams. And so that's kind of been my focus now, is like, how do we build out those spaces and like allocate dedicated time with each of these collaborators to work together early on.
Oh my gosh, Christine, I love that answer. Also, you two just seem like the best to work with. Carolyn, how you were like, I only work on things if it's fun. How do I you? And Christine, thank you too for being mindful about that and being like, well, I think this is a big reason still to this day why we are a very popular meetup and why we still meet, is because it's still kind of very nuanced about like, how do you carve out that time? What does that collaboration actually look like? So super cool. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, we have a question from Karen saying, ever since I heard you have to give data to get data at the think tank, I've had that mantra in my head. I really like that one too. Great job, y'all. Thank you. Anything more to say about that?
Yeah, I can take that. I think, especially with LinkedIn too, like there's just so much data that we ask for. And I think sort of this mantra that we follow is like, everything should be worthwhile. And data is a very sensitive thing. And like, especially things around like your employment or like even things like salary, those are very sensitive things. And we want to make sure that one, like the user understands how we're using that data to serve them. And two is like, we want to give them the power to know like whether they should or shouldn't give data. So I think the mantra of like giving data to get data is like, hey, we should always be contributing back something, like whether it's knowledge, whether it's like data about how this is going to improve their kind of job outlook, et cetera. So that, they feel comfortable and like safe in giving us their data as well. So I think that's a little bit more color around that. And like, Carolyn, I don't know if you have from like a user research perspective, anything around that, but.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I like that you brought up, there's a lot of sensitive information out there. In fact, most users, they don't like to share anything on LinkedIn. So it's almost like, how do you create a good experience to someone who doesn't want to share? And, they shouldn't share, right? Some people are intensely private, but how do you tell a user, like the more data you share, maybe the better experience you might have? And so a lot of it goes back to, I think now everyone's talking about explainability. So I think a lot of it goes back to that as well. So it's designing for the user that will give you lots of data and also the user that won't give you anything, right? So we have to kind of think of both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of your designs that you called out, Christine, around the relevance and kind of being able to like have users have control over like, wait, this one in particular is not relevant to me, or you're seeing this based off of your search history or other jobs you've looked at before in the past, I think like really connects the dots as to like, where does that data actually come from in like kind of a much more, not like a heavy-handed, but much more like subtle way. So I think that's awesome. And shout out to all the UX copywriters out there who also do a lot of that subtle work too. Thank you for that answer. Okay, so we have a question here from Yu Yang around, I'm curious how AI engineers perceive the qualitative insights as their job is to improve algorithm performance quantitatively. So is there a mismatch too in like the qualitative and quantitative? Also, have you observed the algorithm performance improvement after incorporating recommendations to your framework? Or can you speak a little bit about like, how are you kind of like, AI engineers are incentivized in one way and UXers are incentivized in another. What does that collaboration look like?
Yeah, it's really tough. And it's challenging. And I think we still struggle with that. So I think, first of all, I think any engineer is still thrilled to see the results, like the actual results of their work from a user perspective, because they're kind of embroiled in numbers all day long. And to kind of get away from that and to like what I mentioned, sort of the overall mission of LinkedIn, how you're actually creating life-changing opportunity for individuals, people were just so excited. They kept asking, everyone wants this workshop again and again and again. And Christine and I are like, we need to work on other things too. But so that's that, but also like, they are trying to optimize for certain metrics, like any organization, right? And so a lot of times these metrics are hard to really quantify in the sense that there's a lot of things that are working to create this metric. So like the one that I'm talking about is confirmed hires. Now, if you think about confirmed hires, that's a big metric. So you're optimizing for a lot of different things, and a lot of different things contribute to that, not just relevance, right? And so you know, I think there are a lot of different ways we're measuring it, but I think ultimately it's about trying to figure out the best way. And a lot of it is through user research to understand if you're actually improving the relevance for an individual user or user sets. So yeah, it's not a great answer, but it's like kind of like we're working on it. And I'm wondering if Christine, you have more to add on this.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think you're digging at kind of like the tension that happens sometimes between like design and not just engineering, but it's also product, because a lot of those metrics are set by product, right? And so something that I would love to like, you know, I'm working on and thinking through is, as a designer, how do we influence product to just have different metrics to help influence the outcome? Because I think at the end of the day, like a bad relevance experience erodes trust, which may impact usage and may impact like engagement. And so I think like as a designer, there's a way to frame just how these metrics can influence or cannot influence like the user experience, and then how the user experience is actually impacting business metrics. So I think it's definitely something like, you know, we're working through, we're looking at like maybe there's kind of a relevance experience measurement that we can kind of introduce as part of like a product success metric that goes hand in hand with just like some of those business metrics. So I think those are my thoughts on that. And yeah, it's a tough problem for sure.
Well, actually digging in a little bit deeper, and then we'll move to the final question. So, okay, one thing that I love that you all mentioned is like, there's just like LinkedIn is powered by AI. AI is oxygen at LinkedIn. I think that's true for a lot of us who work in tech right now. It's like AI used to be a single thing. Now AI itself is the experience. I want to like kind of riff off of a question that Jake asked around how do you define what problems to solve with AI around like from the UX lens, like you have all this data and you can AI all these different things. How do you even connect that back to like what types of problems should be solved with AI? How does UX get involved? Can you share a little bit about that process for us?
To me, it always starts with a user. And maybe this is like a simplified version of looking at it, because at LinkedIn, it really like a lot of our AI is just recommendation based. And so it's like, how does the user react to this particular recommendation, right? Or something they see in the feed or an ad and things like that. So the problem for me, it starts there. If they're having trouble understanding why something was shown to them, I talked about all those examples at the beginning. That's where you start. And it's just making sure that people also understand what they're seeing, because like sometimes you can't see that through the metrics. So yeah, that's how I would kind of define the problem is sort of user defined, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think with LinkedIn too, just in terms of like using AI to solve for problems, I think it also just comes down to like helping reduce cognitive load. Like there's so much volume on LinkedIn, and we know that users struggle with, you know, in searching for jobs, just like finding the right ones. And everyone is so different. So I think like that's where AI can help solve for that. It's like sort of the personalization aspect of it. It's like, how do you help users like make the match, is what we say internally. And how do we help recruiters make the match too? So it's really about, I think, using AI to weed out what's noise to users and surface things that are most likely going to result in a hiring outcome.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your insights there. Well, I feel like we have so many more questions that we probably can't get to, but at the same time, feel free, y'all, if you want to reach out on Twitter or anything like that too, or LinkedIn, and follow up. I've tagged both Carolyn and Christine in like an MLUX LinkedIn company post, so you can maybe ask some of those questions there. But I have a final question for the two of you. Okay, so we have like a captive audience of UXers, data scientists, PMs, SWEs. What would be like one piece of advice or feedback or food for thought that you would like to leave us all with to chew on or excitedly take back to our teams tomorrow morning?
You want to go first, Christine?
Sure. I guess like for me, it comes down to, I don't know, I guess a piece of advice is like, just get to know each other and like understand what you all can contribute and help each other with. And I think, Michelle, what has been very inspiring with like MLUX is that it like, these things aren't scary concepts. I guess like they're very approachable. People are very approachable, and like you don't have to be an expert in your field, or not in your field, but in their field, to ask questions and to just understand and get to know like what they do and how you guys can collaborate. So I think the biggest thing is just like reaching out, knowing who the people are. And then if you're an IC, like help your manager, help you like build those relationships and start like building those kind of team collaborations. And then if you are a manager, like help build those spaces for collaboration. So that's kind of, I think the thing that's helped me the most in my career is just like building up those relationships and then finding ways to kind of collaborate.
Yeah, you stole mine, Christine. No, doubling down on that. It's you know, another mantra. I'm stealing these from other smarter people that I go by is we're better together. Sounds really corny, but it's true. You can't solve AI problems on your own. You need a team, and you need people smarter than you on your team. And so I feel like that's one of the most important things that we need to be talking about right now. I just feel like there's a lot of chatter about AI from all these different disciplines, and they're all talking at each other. No one's really like working together. And so my hope would be that what you take away from this talk is that you do need to find those friends that will help you, who are also interested in this and eager to kind of tackle it together, because that's the only way I think we're really gonna understand and solve some of these challenges that we're facing today.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love your tangible advice of like, people love watching users use their stuff and understanding what works and what doesn't. And so if you are a data scientist in the room and you've never watched a user researcher do their magic of sitting down with the user and like asking unbiased questions, go find your user researcher and be like, hi, can you test the thing that I built? Yes, get it on their queue. So love that. Thank you all. And I also just want to say big thank you to Christine and Carolyn for spending your evening with us and sharing this knowledge. This has been awesome. I want to just quickly wrap up. Just a reminder too, if you are not following Feminist AI on Instagram, why aren't you? Because you're only on Twitter and LinkedIn. I understand, they're there too. But Krizia, who is joining us, actually runs their Instagram. So check that out. And they have a really amazing community programming. Thank you to all the folks who donated funds for tickets, because that goes to sponsoring that. Also, ta-da, we have a new event in a month. Woohoo! That's going to be that live clustering demo with Jim and Anmal. So if that's of interest to you, feel free to RSVP. But in order to RSVP, remember you have to fill out our community survey. Especially the second page, which is the one around the questions that we're going to use. So being very clear as to what we are using in the live demo, what we are not using in the live demo. So first page is just like, tell us about yourself. The second page is tell us about yourself, plus do you like cats or dogs and coffee and how many hours of sleep do you get at night and so much more. So definitely check that out. And we're just genuinely really interested in you. So like, we want to hear about how to make MLUX better for 2022. So please take 5 minutes, 10 minutes and just fill that out. It would really mean a lot to us because we're trying to improve. Okay, on that note, yay, thank you, Carolyn and Christine. Woohoo! We so appreciate your time, and I know that we're right at time, but maybe you could stay a minute or so. Carolyn, I know you have small children. That's also totally cool. But if anyone, we'll stop the recording, and then if anyone has questions, feel free to come off. Oh, Krizia, you might need to stop the recording.